So we are in John, and I put in the notes that we're starting at 19, but we're actually starting at the end of 18. Just to review, this is Thursday night, if you will, of the night before Jesus, actually now it's the early morning of the day Jesus will be crucified on Good Friday. They had their meal, and then they walked through Jerusalem. He did a lot of teaching to the disciples for the last time. And then he was betrayed by Judas in the garden, and he was taken. And in John's gospel, they have Jesus going first to Annas's house, who was the last high priest. He is no longer the high priest. His son-in-law is. He went to Annas's home in the middle of the night. Then he went to Caiaphas's home. In the Gospel of John, John does not record what happens at Caiaphas's house. That's sort of where the Jewish mock trial was, if you will. And then he went to Pilate's house. And we took it up last week where he was talking to Pilate. Do you want to say something before I go back and read?
The big thing is, in some of the other gospels, they talk about what happened at Caiaphas' house. John doesn't mention it. And I think probably because it was a formality. When they went to Annas, they had already decided to kill him. So John doesn't even bother with the what
details.
goes on.
He does say
the details.
He says
he went there,
yeah.
And it's consistent. But there's really not a lot of point dwelling on the details of it. The outcome was already decided.
So we
yeah. Mary, but there are some red letter lines in this thing spoken by Jesus, and it's pretty powerful. You say that I'm a king. These two people.
Oh, that's when we're going to Pilate's right now.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about it.
Yeah, we're going to start. We went down to 36 last time, but I'm going to take it back up to 28 just to look at the picture as a whole. So it starts with, then they led Jesus away from Caiaphas into the praetorium. By now it was early morning, and the Jews did not enter the praetorium to avoid being defiled and unable to eat the Passover. So Pilate went out to them and asked, "What accusations are you bringing against this man?" "If he were not a criminal," they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." "You take him and judge him by your own law," Pilate told them. "We are not permitted to execute anyone," the Jews replied. This was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken to indicate the kind of death he was going to die. Pilate went back into the praetorium, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Are you saying this on your own?" Jesus asked, "or did others tell you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jews. But now my kingdom is not of this realm." "Then you are a king?" Pilate said. "You say that I'm a king," Jesus answered. "For this reason I was born and have come into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." "What is truth?" Pilate asked. I'm gonna stop there.
Okay. You want to say anything?
No, go ahead.
Well, so it's this is an interrogation. You can see, and he's the only thing Pilate cares about, as I have said, Rome cares about taxes, and they care about keeping the peace, not having an uprising. And he's trying to really find out if there's anything that's important to Rome in all of this. Rome doesn't care about the religious squabbles of the Jews. They just don't care. And we said last week where he says, are you the king of the Jews? And he says, "Is that what you think, or did somebody else tell you that?" And hold on a second, we've got someone to admit. He says, "What am I a Jew? Of course it isn't from me. Your own people brought you in here. What did you do that got them all stirred up?" And he says, "My kingdom is not of this world." Now, what he used was the word kingdom. And so Pilate snaps to that and he says, oh, okay, so you're telling me you are a king. It's just not here. And he says, you say that I'm a king. That doesn't even matter. He says, I was born for this one thing, that
To testify to the truth. And this next section is one of your favorite interchanges.
everyone who belongs to the truth listens to me. And Pilate, and it's a funny thing about belonging to the truth rather than the truth belonging to them. It's not an accident. And we talked this week when we were in Israel, in the business we were in meetings, sometimes they would say, we would say, we have to make a decision about this. The Jews say, we have to take a decision.
So when they're speaking in English, they say it that way. Yeah.
And they didn't get that from English speaking people. Sometimes we reveal how we think about things. And so they talk like there's a whole world of possibilities out there, and we have to take one of them. And it was an odd thing. It stood out to me, but it does say a lot about how they think. And in this case, he says, everyone who belongs to the truth. And it's not an accident. It's an odd phrasing, everyone who holds the truth, everyone who believes in the truth, everyone who belongs to the truth listens to me. And Pilate's response gets, interpreted a lot of ways, but I'm convinced what he says is, what is truth? He's saying, oh, you're one of those people who cling to the truth. I'm in charge from Rome. The truth is what I say it is. And I think he's talking to him sort of like a rube, like, okay, well, you're not dangerous. You're one of those Boy Scouts who talks about truth like it's an absolute. Latin has a word for truth. It's veritas. So it's not like we heard someone this week do a sermon on this, and he asked, what is truth? Like he'd never heard of this concept before. They've got a word for truth. I mean, he would ask people in these trials, are you telling me the truth? Or he'd be thinking it. He's saying, what the truth? What is that to me? What do I care about truth? And that's one of the things.
And the way you said it, he didn't believe there was an absolute truth.
No, what is truth? And it's one of the things that plagues me dealing with political things, that I am convinced there's a truth. The police will say if you have an incident and there are 5 witnesses, you'll get 6 different stories about what happened. But I come back and say only one thing actually happened. We may have a hard time getting to it, but there is a truth. And what Pilate is saying with this, what is truth? It's along the lines of who cares? If people who belong to the truth listen to you, what do I care? The main thing I think he got out of this is, because and you read it, where he says, if I were a king, my kingdom is not of this world. If I was a king in this world, my followers would be out fighting in the streets to keep me from being arrested. But you didn't see anybody rising up, did you? And he says, I've got a kingdom. It's not of this world. And as far as Rome is concerned, good, done. We're done with you. We didn't hear about you actually disturbing the peace in this situation. You're saying that you're not trying to do an uprising against Rome. Pilate's done with this, but that concept of what is truth always sticks with me. I hear that often enough, that attitude of whatever. If you want to get down in the weeds, fine. We just want to solve the problem.
The word belonging to the truth belongs to the truth. 2,000 years passed and we still don't understand what he's talking about. He's not even talking about 5 witnesses.
Oh.
He's talking about the truth
Sure.
from heaven, from God.
Yeah.
And you couldn't expect the Romans to understand that. You could expect the Jews to try to understand that.
You know, Gene, it's a good point. It is the same. We've talked about truth several times through here, kind of from a different direction, but you go back to the beginning of John. In the beginning was the Logos. That's the truth. That's the underlying truth to everything, to all of this. And that is what he's talking about. And he says, everyone that belongs to that listens to me. And I think he's also saying, and we're going to see, I'm going to say this now, but you're going to see it in a little bit. He doesn't expect Pilate to understand. That's, you know, I mean, he really doesn't. And he's not mad at him for not understanding. And there's where I lose it. That's why I can't be involved in politics, because I get irritated with people. I say, but you know, that's not, I mean, that's not what happened. That's not the truth. And he's not mad at him. And we're going to see here in a few verses where he even says, he's not even mad at him for doing this.
I'll challenge people, because when I listen to this in today's world, you hear so many people say, you know, someone says, oh, that's right or that's wrong. And this world is now, well, what's right and wrong for me might not be right and wrong for you. I challenge that, you know.
Well, there are some things that are, but there are some things that
That
are
are
destructive.
destructive.
I can see that. And it's like I just mentioned with me getting involved in politics. I'm not saying nobody else can do it. I don't know how to do it without becoming something that I shouldn't be, but other people can, I think. So let's go ahead.
Okay. And having said this, he went out again to the Jews and told them, I find no basis for a charge against him, but it is your custom that I release to you one prisoner at the Passover. So then, do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews? Not this man, they shouted, but Barabbas. Now, Barabbas was an insurrectionist.
So John's telling us a bunch here once again. You remember, I've mentioned several times about Rome wants peace and quiet, and these Jewish leaders are allowed to stay in power. They're under the Romans, but they have a lot of autonomy. But part of the deal, part of the price of that is they have to keep things under control. They have to keep their people from these uprisings. And it's a trade-off. It is what they get their power very much in exchange for keeping things under control. And so he comes back out and he tells them, there's no reason to put this man on trial. Rome doesn't care about anything he said or done. Rome doesn't care. But he knows he's got a problem because now it's the Jewish leaders that are all riled up. He's got to keep things peaceful. And so he figures out a way. He's actually, it says, looking for a way to release him because he wants things to stay calm. And he says, yeah, you guys we've got a tradition here that at Passover, Rome is going to release one prisoner, one political prisoner. So do you want this guy, the King of the Jews? And he thinks they know he's not the King of the Jews the way they think it. Do you want the guy who all he's done is he's probably crazy? He says he's their king. Or do you want Barabbas? And it tells us, John says Barabbas is an insurrectionist. Think about what that means. This is a guy who has gone out, gotten followers to try and overthrow Rome, to try and kick him out. The Jewish leaders don't want that. They've said it about Jesus. If he gets a following, he could bring the wrath of Rome down on us and we could lose our power. And so Pilate thinks he's given them a choice where they can only go one way. And they say, oh no, not this man. We'll take Barabbas. Now, Barabbas, the bar, that's Aramaic. It means son of, and Abba means father. And all my life, I've thought that meant son of the father, and I couldn't figure it out. But I think I think that comes from the root that means rabbi. So it may well be that this guy is the son of some important rabbi, but he's an insurrectionist. And they say, we'll take the insurrectionist. We'll take our chances with him you're going to kill this guy because he's a direct threat to us. And our power, the people are listening to him and not us. And they say, kill this man.
One aside that we studied this week, and we don't know the exact time, but we have to remember that the Jews did not have the ability to put somebody to death. But they had that ability, and there's some argument whether it was taken away from them 30 years ago or 3 years ago, but it was in their recent history. They used to be able to put someone to death, permitted to put someone to death. And now they were no longer permitted to put someone to death. Okay, yes,
And I think that Pilate knew that,
Oh, of course.
yeah.
because his equal, if he messed up, could be put to death himself.
Pilate's in a dilemma, and so he's kind of riding the currents here, trying to figure out the best way to smooth this over. And when he says, here, I'll release somebody, either this guy who says he's the king, he's harmless and he's not a threat to Rome, or this guy who is a threat to Rome, who's one of your people, who's likely to cause you trouble. He thinks he's figured it out, and they go the other way. So what does he do? As Mary started, he goes back and has him flogged.
But
That-
this is also where disinformation, so the current term. Jesus never said, I am king of the Jews. That I can read,
No.
but somebody said it, and now at this end, Pilate has picked it up. Here's the king of the Jews, and he puts it on that cross.
He talks like that. And the truth is, I don't think he cares
I agree.
one way or the other, because he's not intimidated. Even if he was some hereditary king of the Jews, Pilate doesn't care. Yeah.
Chapter 19. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns, set it on his head, and dressed him in a purple robe. And they went up to him again and again, saying, Hail, King of the Jews, and slapping him in the face. Once again, Pilate came out and said to the Jews, Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him. When Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, Here is the man. As soon as the chief priests and the officers saw him, they shouted, Crucify him, crucify him. You take him and crucify him, Pilate replied, for I find no basis for a charge against him. We have a law, answered the Jews, and according to that law, he must die because he declared himself to be the Son of God. When Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid and went back into the praetorium. Where are you from? He asked. And Jesus gave no answer. So Pilate said to him, Do you refuse to speak to me? Do you not know that I have the authority to release you and the authority to crucify you? Jesus answered, You would have no authority over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of greater sin.
We have to stop. What does that mean? The one who handed you over?
Well, let's work our way through to it, but I won't let it get away. So he takes him back and has him flogged. And this flogging that Rome does is a terrible thing. They have the whip, they have the bits of metal and glass embedded, and they'll give them, a certain number of lashes, but each lash is I won't get into the gory details, but it's a horrible thing. Someone who's been through it comes out. Now, some people will say that this flogging can kill people. Actually, the guys who are the floggers are taught, they're trained, they're instructed. This isn't about killing the person. In fact, in a lot of times, there are periods where if you do kill someone, if you get overzealous, you're in trouble. In fact, you can be punished pretty severely. So the idea is to put somebody in such a horrible state that it sends a message. Rome is all about sending messages that say, don't make the mistake this person made. So they do this horrible beating, and they've dressed him in purple, which purple is a rare color, and it's usually it's royalty who wear it. So he dresses him up like a king, but this horrible bloodied up mess. And he's thinking at that point, this will satisfy him. If you understood how bad the flogging is, they'll look at that and go, okay, fine, you beat him up. Everyone got the message. But as soon as he brings him back out, they start screaming, crucify him. Crucifixion is not exclusively Roman, but at this time in this place, it's a Roman thing. The Jews don't crucify people.
They stone people.
They stone people. They don't crucify them. There have been prophecies about the manner of death that he would go through. And crucifixion is being pierced the way it describes it. He says, when I'm lifted up, it's crucifixion, and it has to come from Rome. And they say, you know, we can't kill him. And he says, I don't find any basis for a charge. And they say, look, we've got a law that says he has to die because he's declared himself the Son of God. Well, Pilate doesn't care about their silly laws, but declaring himself to be the Son of God, now he realizes I've got an even bigger political problem. And he goes back in, and you notice what he says, where are you from? That's been asked all through here. The Jews keep saying, well, we don't even know where he's from. You don't know where, and they think he's from Galilee, and he's really not. This importance of where you're from, he's trying to figure out if you really come from a place where you might be someone important. It's pure politics. Rome believes in a variety of gods. They accept everything. They have a shrine to an unknown God. Just in case we left one out, we don't want to make that one mad. He doesn't care. This is politics. This is him worrying about finding the smoothest course for himself and for Rome.
And an aside on Pilate, isn't it correct that later in Pilate's history, he actually gets put to death because he has crucified somebody he shouldn't have?
He certainly gets taken out of office. There's
Okay. Or taken
some
out of
people
office
say
in a
he
way.
was allowed to escape.
Right.
Doesn't matter. He got in trouble because he killed some people that he shouldn't have. It's not like you see in the movies that Rome is just wildly cruel or whatever. There are limits, and they want peace. So he goes back and says, who are you? And Jesus doesn't speak. Pilate's looking at he says, you're not going to talk to me. He says, don't you know I'm trying to get you out of this? I mean, I have the power to either have you killed or have you released. And Jesus' response is interesting. It's what Jesus is asking about.
Gene.
Or Gene is asking, Gene is asking about. He said,
You would have no authority over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of greater sin.
And what Gene asked about, the one, is he talking about Satan? Is he talking about, because there's obviously a lot of people, and the answer is we don't really know. Judas. Could it be Judas? It could be a bunch of things, but what he's saying is, I'm not upset at you for doing what you got to do as a Roman. You know, he said, you wouldn't have the authority to do this unless it was given to you from above. And it's clear he doesn't mean from Rome. He means from God himself. And he says, so the ones who are at fault here are the ones who handed me over to be killed. It's not you. So the reason I'm not talking to you is I've already accepted this. This authority has been given by God because it's what's intended. And I think that's the important thing, trying to get down and parse out what the one means. I don't know. But I know what he's getting at. And he's saying, as I've said, and we've said repeatedly, the Romans didn't kill him against his will. They didn't take him against his will. It was a sacrifice. And he's making it plain to Pilate. It's not you. This is always meant to happen.
This next,
See, he came, that's his purpose. He's gonna be crucified. He's told everybody, that's my purpose. But he came from the Father. And he came to turn himself in, be crucified. So I was questioning the word sin.
I know.
Yeah.
Yep, the greater sin, and are we really looking at hierarchy and all that? I think, just based on context and other gospels, that the idea here is he's just saying, you know, don't give yourself too much credit for this. You know, if God wasn't willing to allow this, you wouldn't be doing it.
Because I could
Don't,
have walked away like I walked away a couple of other times when they were gonna try to kill me.
yeah, don't overestimate yourself. This has already been ordained. You're okay.
from then on, Pilate tried to release him, but the Jews kept shouting, "If you release this man, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who declares himself a king is defying Caesar."
That's important. That is the, I mean, they have pulled out this trump card because they're letting him know that if he releases this Jesus, they're going to go to Rome.
Tell on him.
They're going, and you think Pilate is all powerful. He is not. He's a military commander there to keep the peace. And they're going to go, and this goes back to the politics of things. They're letting him know, you don't do what we're telling you. And we're going to go upstairs and say, this Pilate let a guy go who's a threat to Rome. If you let him go, you are no friend of Caesar. And we're going to tell Caesar that. And you'll see Caesar's reaction. I mean, Pilate's reaction.
So these Jewish leaders, the other thing is they're not supposed to, you know, bow down to this idea of a king, of the king being Caesar, and they're using it.
They make a great show among the Jewish people of saying, we hate these Roman oppressors and we have to resist. They're not really resisting. They make a show on the left hand of being against Rome, and on the right hand, they certainly use Rome. They play along with them all the time.
When Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat him on the judgment seat at a place called the Stone Pavement, which in Hebrew is Gabbatha. It was the day of preparation for the Passover, about the 6th hour. And Pilate said to the Jews, "Here is your king." At this they shouted, away with him, crucify him." "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," replied the chief priests.
Now, I said Pilate's military, but he's no fool. You don't get to this position without being able to also handle the political headwinds. And so he brings him out and says, you know, here's your king. "Shall I crucify your king?" He knows at that point, nothing but crucifixion, nothing but death. And it can't be them. It has to be, you know, the Romans that kill him. They're gonna, you know, they've played the thing well. So he parades him out and said, "Here's your king. You want me to crucify your king?" And they just scream, you know, crucify him. But when he finally says that last bit, "You want me to crucify your king?" he baits them. And they holler out, "We have no king but Caesar."
At least you got that.
And he uses that, and we're taught even through history, you know, outside of the scriptures, that's sort of a loyalty oath. He got out of them what he required in exchange for doing this for them. And for them to say, "We have no king but Caesar," they are not supposed to say anything other than, "We have no king but God himself and the person that he appoints as king over us, not Caesar." This is a terrible thing they've done in the Jewish law and tradition. It's a terrible thing.
And it's not the Jews that say, "We have no king but Caesar." It's the chief priests.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. And if you remember, chief priests, Rome has a lot of say over that right now. Well, he has gotten them to publicly declare loyalty to Rome. This is a horrible moment in the Jewish culture and religion.
It says priests, chief priests.
It does say that.
How many are there?
It,
Not at that time.
it varies through time. That's a loaded question. The answer I have to give you is, we don't know, they don't know. But what it's saying is, these are the really
Religious leaders.
important religious leaders. That's what it's telling. And it is more than just one, but these are the who's who in Jerusalem.
Because there were some people at the Praetorium that were not ready to crucify Jesus, but they kept it to themselves.
There are people all over, and we'll see that as we come up through this next section. There are people that, in fact, because I've mentioned politics several times today, because if we get there, and I think we will, there are people within political circles, within the Sanhedrin, who are absolutely believers, who absolutely stick their neck out to follow him. It's not impossible. And it reminded me this week of the line where he says it's harder for a rich man to go, for a camel to go through the eye of a needle, but he's not saying it's impossible. A lot of people with wealth lean on the wealth, they lean on themselves, but that doesn't prevent them. There's one of the sort of mistakes people make, is to act like all rich people are evil. That's garbage. And I tend to get too rigid on politics and politicians, but we see examples in this lesson of people who are high up in that Jewish hierarchy that are believers and that do the right thing. So it's dangerous to get to what am I trying to say? But to get too rigid and say that everybody who's involved in these higher levels are bad. They're just not bad people. They're not all. So
The other thing here says, it happened in the 6th hour, just so you know, the 6th hour at that time, this was noon. So it was noon. This would be noon on Friday. Then Pilate handed Jesus over to be crucified, and the soldiers took him away. Carrying his own cross, he went out to the place of the skull, which in Hebrew is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side, with Jesus in the middle. Pilate also had a notice posted on the cross, and it read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Many of the Jews read this sign because the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. So the chief priests of the Jews said to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews, but only that he said, 'I am the King of the Jews.'" Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written."
and this, Luis must have dropped out.
Oh.
The first part of this place of the skull, crucifixion, this is Rome. They love to send messages. You wouldn't take somebody, if a Roman citizen is going to get executed, they take him to a private courtyard and they do it quickly and painlessly. They'll behead them or something. But these kind of people, they take out, and this was a hill just outside Jerusalem that's sort of shaped like a skull. And they put them up on the top of the hill so that everyone can see this as it happens. It is intended to be brutal. It's intended to send a message. So the next person who thinks, maybe I'll rise up against Rome, maybe I'll cross the Roman leader, will think twice. And they take him out there. And this you kind of, I don't want to say you have to love, but you really have to give him credit. Pilate has this sign put up above Jesus's cross.
In 3 languages.
And he does it in 3 different languages so that everybody gets a message. And he says, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." He is gonna rub their nose in this. These Jewish leaders that have demanded that he crucify him, or that he lets them crucify him. He's identified him and he's saying, "This is the King of the Jews hanging up there." And they go nuts, as you can imagine. And they go to Pilate and send somebody. Don't say that. Make another sign that says he called himself the King of the Jews. Pilate's response, I said what I said. This is your king now, and he's being killed, and you did it. And he's rubbing their nose in it.
And letting him know that he didn't want to do it and they gave him no choice.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, it is that part of politics that this you almost have to admire. I mean, if you're gonna play power politics, this is it. And he has already gotten them to say, we have no king but Caesar. So he's saying, well, now you really don't, do you? You owe me.
You know, we're 2,000 years after the fact, but it doesn't say king of Asia. Give me a country, give me a body, an opponent of Rome. It just says Jews. It's a religious term. It is not a geographical location.
The Jews historically, and Gene is talking about how it's king of a people and not a region. They have things that are very admirable and very useful. And one of them is, even when they're spread all across the known world,
To this day.
to this day, they're one people. They are a nation wherever they're located.
What's the term?
Diaspora. And the diaspora is this spreading out, but they remain one people. When we were there, they estimate what percent of people are religious Jews in Israel?
5%.
5%. It's probably less. But on Friday, Thursday,
Friday
they
at sunset.
they serve kosher in the cafeteria at work. They observe these religious things that they don't even believe in because they're one people. And it's hard to convey. So when he says King of the Jews, it actually, it's a country and a people and a religion, and it's all rolled up in one.
When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they divided his garments into 4 parts, one for each soldier. With the tunic remaining, it was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. So they said to one another, let us not tear it. Instead, let us cast lots to see who will get it. This was to fulfill the scriptures. They divided my garments among them and cast lots for my clothing. So that is what the soldiers did.
And we, in other gospels, we see how much prophecy is wrapped up in him being killed at Passover, being the sacrificial lamb, and the parallels, and we'll do a study on that. I mean, we have to at some point. The parallels are uncanny. A lot of the time, prophecy sort of leaves me flat. People will say this is prophecy, and I'll go, I don't know, it's kind of weak. But there are prophecies of this death and what led up to it and the purpose in it that are amazing. They're uncanny. And in this one of the prophetic Psalms,
Psalm 22, verse 18.
Psalm 22, verse 18, that is recognized as being messianic. It talks about them casting lots for his clothes. And some of the pieces of cloth, and this should tell us how good we've got it. Pieces of cloth, we'd probably discard, but it has value. And so they divide it among them. But the last piece, this seamless sort of robe, is worth something. They say it would be dumb for us to cut it into pieces. So instead, let's leave it whole and we'll cast lots for it. It's sort of like dice. And whoever wins gets the whole thing, winner take all. They don't know, though, that is an exact fulfillment of one of the messianic prophecies. And what you need to know is that if that one didn't get fulfilled, some people would have said, hey, wait a minute, this probably isn't because this part didn't get fulfilled. But there's another one, the manner of death, casting lot for the clothes, that had been prophesied many, many hundreds of years earlier.
So I keep reading that back to the purpose of John's gospel. How many different prophecies do I have to fulfill for you to believe me? Help me to believe.
And you know, I had promised you we would get there, but just in case, you're absolutely right. We started this study with John saying, I'm going to tell you all this stuff so that you may believe. There's a lot more, but I'm going to tell you enough that it will, you know, you're going to have enough to believe. And this is one of them. He does it all through here. He reminds them this uncanny thing of them casting lots for his garments had been prophesied. And John reminds us, and as Gene reminds me, John does this because he's already told us, I'm giving you these details so that you can believe.
Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother and her sister, as well as Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." So from that hour, this disciple took her into his home.
There's so much, again, you hate to pick things completely to pieces, but the men, the disciples, his followers, with the exception of John, and as I've said a couple of times before, John refers to himself as the disciple that Jesus loved. They were close. But the other ones are hiding. They've already gone off and closed the door, and they're scared to death. The women, however, are there. And his mother is there with some friends. John is there. And even at that moment, and even though we talk about him being both God and man, this is his mother. His stepdad, Joseph, Joseph's dead. And for a widow in this time, they're in a predicament. And he's looking after his mother, and he thinks to look down at that time and tell John, behold your mother. From now on, you treat her like she's your actual mother. And there are other people that are referred to as his brothers. I'm not going to get in that debate ever again. But he goes to John and he tells John, from now on, this is your mother. But he tells her, look at him like your own son.
And in case one uses an argument whether he had brothers and sisters or not, but if he did have brothers and sisters, why wouldn't one of his brothers take him? At that point, they weren't believers.
Yeah, we learned that James, for instance, doesn't believe at this time.
Or Jude.
Or yeah, but they come to. But this is one of those touching moments where he says, behold your mother and behold your son. From that time, he took her into his home. Okay.
But is it no more than just, I mean, he's talking from the human perspective. But he's really talking about the spiritual bond.
I can't answer that. I know the idea of taking her into his home is a physical act. And that at least says to me that he took care of her needs. He treated her like his own mother. Regardless, he is taking care of the welfare of Mary, even here in his last moments. And I think it's a touching act.
After this, knowing that everything had now been accomplished and to fulfill the scripture, he said, I am thirsty. A jar of sour wine was sitting there. So they soaked a sponge in the wine, put it on a stalk of hyssop, and lifted it to his mouth. When Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, it is finished. And bowing his head, he yielded up his spirit.
And there are prophecies about the sour wine. I mean, all of this,
That's in
Just-
Psalm 22, verse 15.
it's 22 verse 15. I was going to say that, but I didn't want to be, okay. So the prophecies, the things that happen, and all he says is, I thirst. And they dip bread in a mixture of oil and hyssop and vinegar. Once again, this is not maybe as nice, but it actually is something that quenches thirst better than you might think. It stops the mouth from being parched. But the point is, it fulfills a prophecy of what was going to happen here at this death. And then though, here's the important part. After that, after he'd gotten this vinegar, this sour wine, he says, "It is finished." And I went and looked at that word, and it means completed. We watched somebody who said that they used it in accounting. They have old Roman documents that will say, use that word, and it means paid. You were wanting to say this?
Paid in full.
Paid in full.
Yeah.
And he uses a very emphatic word that says, I have finished this phase of things. It's a cool word and it fits so well, but he says, all of this that I was sent to do is now completed. The prophecies are completed. And then
My sacrifice for your sins is, your sins are paid in full. And,
Paid in
this is
full.
one of those things, whether you've been a lifelong churchgoer or not, everybody has heard the Passion story over and over again at Easter time on Good Friday. And some of this stuff, we're so used to hearing it that we don't listen to the details. The thought that the last thing he said was, "It is finished."
my
the
work
is
is done
done,
and it is
it's
paid in full. And look at that last sentence there. He yielded up his spirit. And that also is a very emphatic word. It can even mean to abandon someone, to betray, but it is a very deliberate act of putting something away, of putting a person away, of letting go and sort of shoving something away. He yielded up his spirit. Now, John is telling us once again, all these reminders, they didn't do it against his will. He gave the sacrifice. And I always try and remind people, you're free to believe what you want, but sometimes I can tell you what John is saying. And John makes a real point of letting us know that he then yielded his spirit. And we're going to see that in just a minute. So before we delve into it, there's some confirmation of that.
Real quick. What was the word used for yielded?
That's the one I told you. And do I remember the actual Greek word? I don't, but I looked at it a lot from a lot of angles and how it gets used. And as I said, it is this very deliberate, a word that means a very deliberate putting away something, letting go of it.
Is it the same word or similar to the words when he's on the cross and says, "Why have you abandoned me?" Because it seems to me abandon, pushing you away. And this one is, you've done your part, bottom of the ninth, you gotta do what you gotta do, it's done. It's finished.
I'll find out. I'm a hack when it comes to Greek. I do my homework, but I mean, it only goes so far. What I can tell you is that this word, John is telling us that he does this intentionally on his own.
It was a day of preparation, and the next day was a high Sabbath. In order that the bodies would not remain on the cross during the Sabbath, the Jews asked Pilate to have the legs broken and the bodies removed. So the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first man who had been crucified with Jesus, and those of the other. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water flowed out. The one who saw it has testified to this, and his testimony is true. He knows that he is telling the truth, so that you may believe.
So the Jews, this is about to be Passover feast, a high Sabbath. And it would be uncouth to have people hanging out on these crosses. The guy that we've just demanded you execute for no reason, it would be uncouth if we let him be there during our Passover celebration. So they send messengers to Pilate and said, "Hey, can you break the legs? And I don't want to beat this up.
But crucifixion takes longer than 3 hours.
A lot of people hang on a cross for days. It is one of the most agonizing ways anyone has ever devised to die. And they generally suffocate because hanging, the lungs can't function. They raise themselves up on their feet, they take in air, and then they go back down. And it is painful, it is excruciating, but they can hang there a long time. So what they do is they break the legs, they can't raise themselves up anymore, and they die quicker. And if you break the legs, they're going to die relatively quickly because they can't breathe, and they want them pulled down because their celebration is coming. We're told Pilate is surprised well, actually, we're not told that till later. Pilate says, send some soldiers out to break their legs. And the other two are still kicking. Jesus is already dead. John has told us he yielded up his spirit, and they're probably surprised to see, oh, this one is already dead.
And it says here, the one who saw it has testified to this, and his testimony is true. That is John. I mean, John, we know John was there. We know John wrote this gospel. So John knows that he is telling the truth so that you also may believe. I mean, it goes back to his very purpose of this gospel.
The soldier sticks the tip of this spear, these long, thin spears, into his side. And for one thing, they've been sent out to be sure that he's dead. We have, Mary complains a lot these days because she'll say someone set up a meeting for me, and the person will say, well, I called, but I couldn't get them on the phone. And we see this all the time. You know, that seems to be a millennial trait. Well, I knocked on the door and no one answered. Well, no, I didn't send you there to knock on the door. I sent you there to make an appointment. I sent you there to do this or to deliver this thing, and you didn't do it. This soldier's job is to go make sure that they're dead, so they'll be off the crosses for the Passover. And so one of them sticks him. If he's still alive, if he's still got a little breath in him, that will certainly rouse him. And then they'll break the legs. But he's dead. And it says that blood and water came out. When you die, it usually, with this manner, water collects in the cavity, fluids collect. Hypovolemic shock or pleural effusion, if you want to know. But they know enough to know that when blood and water come out, he's dead. And why is this so important that John lets us know this? These are the questions you got to ask, that extra question. Why does John go to all that trouble of saying he was already dead?
And
Well,
this next sentence, now these things happened so that the scripture would be fulfilled. Not one of his bones will be broken. And as another scripture says, they will look on the one they have pierced. And so those are two different, one of them is Psalm 69, verse 21, and the other one's Psalm 34, verse 20.
but there's another reason, because John is writing this after the fact, and he knows the body disappears. And there are people to this day who say, well, he wasn't really dead. You know, maybe he was in a coma, maybe, because people say they saw him walking around after this. So they have, well, here's a logical explanation. He wasn't really dead. And John tells us that Roman soldiers were sent there to be sure. They're pretty thorough. But he says, I saw this with my own eyes. It comes out, they poke him, and what comes out is blood mixed with water. And that says that this cavity, I mean, he's saying, I saw it with my own eyes. And the one who saw it, this is John talking about himself. He testifies that it's true, and he knows that it's the truth. He was dead. Are we at time?
We are, we'll go
And
to
no,
the.
actually, to me, that says even more. It's a blood and water, both symbols of God.
When Nicodemus comes to him at night, he tells him, you must be born of blood, but also a spirit. I mean, is there a lot tied into this? Sure. But I think the soldiers are there for one purpose. Pilate says, go be sure they're dead. And somewhere through here, It's in Mark. But we're told that Pilate was actually surprised to hear that he was already dead. Because people just don't die in 3 hours hanging on a cross. And we're told specifically, Pilate was shocked to hear it. John is being sure we know his body, as we know it, was dead.
And we're at 10.
And we're at 10 o'clock.
Mhm.
Well, then we can quit. These are times where I miss having people and not having Zoom so that we can talk and ask questions. There's a lot through here, but this, the prophecies of the bones not being broken. Real quickly, this is Passover, and people bring their lambs for the sacrifice at Passover, and they're not to break the bones, any of them. The Passover lamb, they are not to break any of the bones. And then that was prophesied about this death, that none of his bones would be broken. It's amazing prophecy. And John, as Jean pointed out, is telling us things so that we might believe. He is showing all of these things that have been, some of it even seems illogical. Why would somebody prophesy that? But this comes about in such a way that unless you're looking for a way to deny it, the prophecy itself is very clear. And we see in the scriptures, there's a reference where it says the lamb that was, slain before the beginnings of the world, that you have a plan, that you had a plan, and it included us. And it is strange to me that you would do this. It's strange to me that you did do it, and that you gave us all of these reasons, all of these examples that are enough to believe if we choose to, and they're enough to ignore if we choose not to. But we see in this account that John left for us that you loved us enough to send Jesus to do this amazing sacrifice, and that all of the things we give ourselves credit for of being powerful in this world are nothing. They don't amount to much if you haven't given the authority for it. And we don't always understand why you would. Why would you allow this and not allow that? And we trust. We know that you love us, and we see the example, we see the truth of that, and we're grateful for it. This is a week when we get these rains, when we see these changes, and we see the political upheaval, where all of these things are in front of us. Remind us, let the things that we study remind us that no matter how much chaos we think we see, there's a plan. It's your plan, and you're in control. Amen.
You guys can unmute yourself and know that next week Baylor plays BYU. So you going to Utah, Julian? You guys going?
At BYU.
Yeah,
gonna go,
we're
yeah.
going. We're going. So I don't know if we'll be on the call just because, and then we fly out early Sunday morning to head for
Oh,
DC.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, enjoy.
It's pretty good. It's pretty gutsy to fly to DC on 9/11. But Julie is the
Extra
main,
prayers.
yeah.
You guys, this is, we were talking last night. This has got to be a great time for all of you. Enjoy it.
Yeah.
And those of you who live here, drive by and look at the ditch in our front yard. But the good news is we've had some pretty good rain, and I think we're getting close to not having to worry about flooding in this place, as long as the ditch doesn't back up. I don't think anything is gonna, ever help that. But drive by and have a look. I found somebody who really knows what he's doing, and they did a great job. So, and a lot of the little ditches, the kidney stone, I think has a lot to do with me being out in 95-degree heat, dehydrated, drinking iced tea, eating red meat, all of the good stuff. But I was out here, I've been out here for a long time digging trenches, but I think it's working pretty well. So we're nice and dry.
You guys have a
And
good
Scott-
Labor Day weekend.
Yes.
But
Maybe you can
Scott,
share a picture with us of the ditch.
oh, yes. And remember, well, it's not a ditch. Just Scott, remember that water features increase the value of your property.
Well, I'll send out a picture with the link this week.
Water
And
features.
you be the judge of whether it's a water feature or a ditch, okay?
And ultimately, it will be nice. Right now, there's this big black pipe going down the middle of it, but anyhow, we did put grass seeds. This whole thing is
Oh,
hysterical.
and those of you who are still on, we've cleaned that garage. If it's big enough, that's where we're gonna meet. And we're gonna have a more normal meeting space and a more normal living room. So we've been busy. We're doing what we can.
Cool.
Have a
Happy
great
Labor
week,
Day,
y'all.
everybody.
Thank
Good to see
you.
you all.
Guys.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
They say they want coffee.